With HTTP functions, you can add new capabilities to the tools you build in internal, allowing you to build powerful and robust tools to accomplish whatever your users need. Let's take a look at an example. In a new space, let's pull up app data. We've already connected Mailchimp as a new HTTP data source. This is something that you can do with any platform that has an open API. Now, let's go ahead and create a new function. Let's call it add user to mailing list. Next, let's go ahead and fill in the path. This is something that the Mailchimp API has to specify the list that we want to add a new member to. The method that we're going to want to use here is post. And we don't need to provide any URL parameters or headers for this function, but we do need to provide a JSON body. So let's select that and let's provide the payload below. Now, this is all according to the Mailchimp API. Note that we've created some new parameters here for the user email, first name, and last name. Let's go take a quick look at those new parameters. They're all plain text, and they're all required, so everything here looks good. Let's go ahead actually and run our function and test it out. So let's just provide some test values here. And run the function. One important thing to note is that running this function will post the new data into Mailchimp, so be careful if you're running it against production. In this case, we're posting into a demo mailing list for testing purposes. Everything looks good here, and you can see this is what's returned by Mailchimp once we run this function. Let's go to Outputs and hit Update. And you can see that these are all of these fields that are returned by the function. This also looks good, so let's go ahead and just save our function. Now, let's take a look at how we might use this function. For example, we can take a table and populate it with our users, let's say coming from Postgres. And we want to list our customers here. One thing that we can do is if we want to create a button here and tie it to the Mailchimp API, we can quickly go ahead and go to Columns and add a button as a new component. We'll choose Mailchimp as our data source, and we're going to choose the add user to mailing list function that we just created. And you'll see here that we have these three required fields that are the parameters that we created earlier. Let's go ahead and bind them to the values that are in this table. So, for example, for a user email, we can bind it to this row, the data in this row, and then the email. And let's go ahead and do the same thing for first name and last name. And let's call this button subscribe. Now let's go ahead and publish our space. And let's take a look at our tool in action. So now whenever we hit the subscribe button, this will call the Mailchimp API and basically add this user using their first name, last name, and email to our mailing list. So let's hit subscribe. And now, if we pop over to our Mailchimp instance and refresh the users in this list, you can see that that person has been added as a new customer and is subscribed to this list. That's it. That's the basics of how to use internal to create a HTTP write function that will allow you to write data into any platform with an open API.